Okay, I'll just hang on for a couple of minutes, I think, just to see if people come in.
17, 18 participants now in.
Do you want to put the slides up, Lou, and I'll start. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Northwest LPCs Oriel updates and practical tips for foundation trainee recruitment. I'm hoping if you could put the next slide on, please. Thank you. Thank you. I'm here today with Louise Gatley from Community Pharmacies Greater Manchester. We're really pleased to be welcoming Jane Brown, our Regional Head of Pharmacy NHS Northwest School of Pharmacy and Meds Optimisation. We're also here with Khalid Khan, our Training Programme Director, Trainee Pharmacist, Northwest School of Pharmacy and Meds Optimisation, and also leading Oriel. And we're also joined by Noma Al-Ahmed, Managing Director of Propharmace, and Rosie James, the Pharmacy Programme Director. Next slide, please. And the agenda today, as a brief introduction from myself, thank you for joining. We've got an NHS Northwest HE Oriel update, and then we're going to move on where Propharmace are going to provide an overview of supervisor training for educational supervisors and designated prescribing practitioners. Then we'll go on to talking about practical tips for finding a DPP, and Louise from CPGM will very kindly be hosting a Q&A session at the end. Thank you. I'll now hand over to Jane. Thank you very much, Jane.
Thank you, Lovejet. So yes, hi everyone, I'm Jane Brown and I'm Pharmacist Dean across the northwest of England for NHS England Workforce Training and Education. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background, and then myself and Khalid will go into a little bit more detail around this. So everyone on the webinar will be well aware, I'm sure, that we've got significant changes to the initial education and training for pharmacists. And part of those changes mean that NHS England, as in the Workforce Training and Education Directorate, we used to be Health Education England, will now be responsible for the quality management of all foundation trainee pharmacists. So that's really quite a dramatic change for us. We're taking on sort of 2 to 3 times more foundation trainees than we used to look after in the past. And that's really good because we can be more consistent about the training, and we can support those of you who are designated supervisors or employing trainee pharmacists. So some of the key things for you to remember is that, and be aware of, is that the Oriel recruitment system will be the only route to recruiting a trainee pharmacist for the 25-26 year and after that. This is the requirement set by the GPHC. So GPHC have been absolutely clear. Foundation trainees who have been recruited through Oriel will be able to join the register as a pharmacist at the end of their training. And the reason for that is that because if they're recruited through that system, we know where they are and we can support the quality management of their training. So as an employer, if you're interested in hosting a foundation trainee pharmacist, you must list your programme within Oriel by the 1st of March this year. So that's for the 25-26 year. I know some of you will have already used Oriel, but many of you won't have done. And Khalid is going to go into a lot more detail about that later on. So for the 25-26 training year, all trainees will need access to a prescribing environment and a designated prescribing practitioner. Now, you know that the foundation trainee pharmacists who complete their training during that cohort will come out as independent prescribers at the point of registration. So that's why they need access to a prescribing environment and the DPP as well. It's your responsibility as a pharmacy employer to enable this. but we will, we're talking to our training hubs, and we're looking at what support we can enable to match you to DPPs across the Northwest. And then the following year, so this is the 2026-27 year, all trainees will also need access to a rotation of at least 13 weeks in an alternative sector, so hospital general practice or health and justice alongside community pharmacy. And the reason for staggering this is that we felt that to implement the prescribing training and multi-sector rotations all in one go was too much of an ask, really. So we are staggering it. But the hope is that by providing that training environment during the 25-26 training year, you will already have started to build relationships with other pharmacy environments that can provide that multi-sector rotation. And then just to reiterate, because of our recruitment timelines, if you do want to employ a trainee pharmacist in 25-26, you must register with the Oriel system by the 1st of March this year. And I think what I want to say as well is that it's more important that you get those posts registered on the Oriel system, because it's a lot easier for us to take posts out than it is to put them in after the 1st of March. So just go ahead and do that. Next slide, please. So just to explain the key changes to the initial education and training standards. So we've got much more clinically focused learning outcomes, and the outcomes span the full 5 years of training. So what we used to have is 4 very separate undergraduate years and then a 1-year pre-registration training. But the new GPHC standards cover the whole 5 years of learning. So what undergraduates will do is start to be assessed against all of those learning outcomes during the undergraduate years. And when we've delivered other webinars, I think what's become quite apparent is that a lot of employers think that the foundation trainees, when they come to them, are going to be exactly the same as the pre-reg pharmacists were in the past, but they'll be very, very different. Our 3 schools of pharmacy, and those across the country as well, have been changing the undergraduate years to make sure that the undergraduate students start meeting those learning outcomes. So it's not as if you're starting from scratch. They will be quite different when they come to you in the future. And there's definitely been a big expectation placed upon our health education institutes and training providers to have students and trainees operating at a higher, more autonomous level. And this will be built up as they go through that 5 years of training. Our 3 schools of pharmacy across the Northwest will have worked really, really hard to expand their undergraduate placements. And many of you will have already been providing placements to undergraduate students from Manchester, UCLan or Liverpool John Moores. What's really important is part of that enables the undergraduates to demonstrate and be assessed and show that they can do things at a DUS level. So if you think about that, if you look at the standards for education and training, you can see that we build up about the levels of how people can, or the pharmacists can demonstrate what they can do in practice, rather than just showing or telling you how. They will actually be able to demonstrate that they can do it. And there's a big focus on the prescribing as well. So you'll know that we had the interim learning outcomes because we couldn't assess prescribing in these initial years, but from 25-26, we will be assessing the prescribing learning outcomes. And there's a much stronger focus on equality, diversity and inclusion throughout the 5 years of training. Next slide, please. So there's 4 key elements here of the foundation training year. So NHS England will be taking on the role of a statutory education body, and that means that the GPHC will be delegating responsibility for the quality management of foundation training to us. and we will have responsibility for all trainee pharmacists in England across all sectors. And a similar process is happening across Scotland and Wales as well. And we're working really closely with our colleagues in the other countries. So the 4 elements are that we will have a trainee pharmacist recruitment and selection system and process. And this is why we're here today, to explain about the National Recruitment Scheme, which is otherwise known as Oriel. And that doesn't matter where they're going to be employed. Every single trainee pharmacist has to go through that. And just to make you aware that our schools of pharmacy are also working really hard to let the current undergraduates know that they mustn't accept a training post that hasn't gone through Oriel. So hopefully that message is getting out there and everyone will know about that. So there are key requirements for having a post in Oriel, and these are listed here. We'll go into more detail later, but one is that you've got to have a designated supervisor, as you do at the moment, and then also that access to a prescribing learning setting. And across the Northwest, we've been working with our trusts and our primary care networks, our GP pharmacists as well, to work out how we can expand the access to prescribing learning settings. As part of that, the trainees will need access to a designated prescribing practitioner, and this links into the prescribing learning setting. And then from 26-27 across sector rotation as well, but we will worry about that nearer the time. NHS England has developed an assessment strategy, so you must sign up that you will engage with that, and we can talk you through that whole process and share the links to it after the webinar. And then also we have an e-portfolio as well for the trainees that we have commissioned. So NHS England will provide national learning materials alongside the assessment strategy in the e-portfolio, and these will be available to all trainees irrespective of the site that they're training in, and that will support the overarching assessment strategy. We will also provide a very basic training course provision, and that's to ensure that we've got consistent access to training across all sectors of practice. What this doesn't mean, though, is that you can't access your own training courses as well if you want to do that, because the one that we procure and provide will be of a very, very basic level. Next slide, please. Oh, I think I've done all that. Thank you. So some of the key changes that you need to be aware of for you as an employer is that any organisation can now employ a trainee. And you will be eligible for the training grant as long as you meet all the programme requirements and you put your training post in the Oriel system. And you will know that there's been change in the quantity of the training grant as well. You will need to commit to contracting with NHS England, and we're just working out what that's going to look like. So something that has also changed about foundation training is that trainees must spend 26 weeks in a patient-facing setting. So in the old days, that meant essentially you had to work in a community pharmacy that was open to the public or in an NHS hospital. However, the GPHC have now said that this can include general practice as well. So general practice can employ foundation trainee pharmacists. But an important thing to remember, though, is that trainees obviously must also have access to a setting with a dispensary that's supervised by a GPHC registrant. So that's a community pharmacy or a hospital with an on-site pharmacy. So if general practice employ foundation trainee pharmacists, they are going to have a collaboration, a relationship with another sector of pharmacy so that they can meet those dispensing outcomes. We won't accept dispensing practices to do that. Next slide, please. And I think I'm handing over to Khaled now. Thanks very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Jane, for very helpfully setting out that background, and there is a lot of background to set out, so thank you very much. I'm going to go into some of the nuts and bolts of Oriel. But before I do that, just want to go into a bit more detail of what I do, because I think it's relevant here, especially with it being a webinar for community pharmacists and contractors and employers. I work for NHS England, day and a half a week. I am part of that role is I am the Northwest Oriel lead. But the majority of my time is still spent in community pharmacy. My heart is in community pharmacy. About 20, I'm not going to give you my whole life story, but about 20 years ago, I did my pre-registration in community over in Lytham near Blackpool. I locumed for 2 years in community after that, and then I got my first managerial job for the company I now still currently work for, and that was November 2007. So I say that because I think it's important that my fellow colleagues and community pharmacists understand that I recognise the challenges that will be faced adjusting to these new changes, but also that I'm here to support as well. There's lots of faces and names I recognise on this call. I'm also a sitting member of the Lancashire South Cumbria LPC, so I can see some names on here: Kath, Ben, and Sarah, who I spent all of Tuesday with on our latest meeting. So very much one of you, and beyond this webinar, if anybody wants to reach out, do feel free to reach out, because there's many people on this call that have already helped in the past when you need to. So we're in this together. Okay, so getting into Oriel itself, some of the nuts and bolts. When we talk about Oriel, technically we're talking about the IT system. That's the system that's used to recruit foundation pharmacists into traditionally hospital places and also some community places. We've been using it in pharmacy since 2017. That's when the first recruitment round started, and the first trainees were recruited who started in 2018 came through Oriel. But we've always been able to recruit outside of Oriel if you're a community pharmacist. But even before then, Oriel has been used to recruit dentists, doctors, and other healthcare scientists. So it's not new. We sort of jumped on that bandwagon a little bit later on. It's great for the trainees. They only need to apply once, and they can apply hypothetically for every single program in the country. We don't advise you do that, but they can do. So it's very easy for them. When we talk about Oriel, for the purpose of this webinar and outside as well, we tend to be talking about the overall process, okay, which I'm going to go into in the next slide, please, if we could move on. Thank you. So these are some of the stages that make up Oriel. So initially, there's the program submission. That's the phase we're in at the moment. So January to March. So registration is currently open, where you can submit your program. So when you talk about programs, it's your vacancy. It's what you're offering as an employer to trainee pharmacists. So you submit that program by the 1st of March. After that, the applicants, who are the students, so the university students who are just finishing the 3rd year, starting and about to start the 4th year, they will register over that summer to apply via Oriel. And then they'll go through a system where they will have a look at all the programs that have been submitted on Oriel, and they will make like a short list of all the ones they would like to work at, and then they will preference them. That means ranking them in order of which ones they want to go to the most, which ones they want to go to the least, and they'll omit the ones that they don't want to go to at all. After that, around September, October time, they undergo some assessments. They'll all do the same assessments. They will be scored on these assessments, and based on those scores, they'll be given offers. So the higher they scored, the more likely they are to get their preferred option, and the lower they score, the more likely to get one that they least preferred. So it's a fair system, and what we have seen through that is cohorts of underrepresented groups, ethnic minority groups, and genders as well, have been able to be better represented in the more higher competitive and higher sought after places. So it's had a really positive effect in terms of opening up access. Okay, and the last part is that once the offers have been made and the students have accepted or rejected those offers, then the employers around mid-December will be informed as to the trainees that they've been allocated to start the following July or August. Next slide, please. So it's very important to understand that this is a student-driven process. So it's not NHS England just sending students willy-nilly wherever they want to. And it's not me at a laptop on a spreadsheet just sending the best students to my mates. I wish I had that level of power, but Jane does not trust me with those keys to that safe just yet. But basically, the students, they choose where they want to go to. They will rank their programs, whether it's hospital, community, general practice, in the order that they want to. They are assessed, and the score they get will dictate their placement offer, and then the students who are the ones who accept or reject the offer. So NHS England does not get involved anywhere. It's a very fancy, clever algorithm that does it. It's entirely the students who choose. Next slide, please. Okay, I tried to get this to be as kind of give it the best clarity as possible, trying to play around with the slide, but it was quite difficult. This is the best I could do. But this is the screenshot of the Oriel page if you were to go into it. And it's just to show you the filters that are in place. So when a student wants to filter out, there's about 3,000-4,000 programs on Oriel initially. So a student can narrow down their search to see what's close to them and what kind of fits their criteria and desires. They can put these filters in, so they can put in the employer type, which is primary care. So community pharmacy is categorized as primary care, which it absolutely should be, and NHS England are very passionate about that. We are very much part of the primary care workforce, so that's how we are categorized as an employer type. In this example, I have put the region of the Northwest and my home county, Lancashire, because why not? So that's how they would filter and narrow down their search, just in case you're wondering. Next slide, please. So that's kind of a very brief overview of what Oriel is, just so you understand what it looks like and how it works. There are some more resources if you want to do some more reading, and they're very, very useful resources that you can use. The registration is open now. Programs have to be in by the 1st of March. The deadline is really, really, really strict, very strict. And it always has been. Even I can't get my programs in through the back door after this date. I'll get my wrist slapped. Once the programs are in, we can make adjustments for a period of time. About 4 weeks afterwards, if things change, we can make those adjustments. Numbers can be changed much further down the line. So what I would say is, if you have a genuine, a realistic chance of getting in a program with a prescribing environment and with a DPP in place, if you have a realistic chance of doing that, get your program in, and then you can still carry on making those arrangements. If there's absolutely no chance you're going to do that, you've got no intention of doing that, then it's not worth you putting a program in. Okay, so that's the advice that I would give on that front. There is a link there to register on the website. You can get more information in the handbook that's available online. So these slides will be shared at the end of the session. I think somebody's already asked that, and you should be able to link to these resources via the slides, hopefully, because these are all embedded links. The handbook spells out everything in incredible detail. So if you're a reader, that is a source that you want to go to, and that tells you everything you need to know. There is another resource, which is the training site requirements, which goes into a bit more detail about some of the things we've discussed. It's a 2-page document, only 8 bullet points. It's not very long, but you can quickly skim through that. That's got information on there for you. There's a really good tutorial video. Wendy Lee from down south has done, it's about 20 minutes long. Again, she talks through how to fill in the form, so you cannot get it wrong field by field. She will talk you through the process. So again, very, very useful if you're more of a visual learner like me, not much of a reader. That'll be good for you. And a very recent document that's come out, which is very useful, is the prescribing supervision and assessment in the foundation training year. That is a document which helps you look at which activities can be mapped against the prescribing activities during the foundation training year, and includes some examples from community pharmacy, for example, CPCS. It's not got pharmacy first in there because of the timing of when it was published, but something like pharmacy first, hypertension case finding service. We've done some exercises, some mapping exercises. We think we can easily get 40%, roughly 40% of the prescribing competencies ticked off in community pharmacy without a DPP, without an IP present. Okay, so there's a lot of scope here to meet a lot of those prescribing environments. And as the years go on, and hopefully, fingers crossed, I know Finn's on this call, I'm sure he'll be pushing for this. When we have more prescribing activity in community pharmacy, we'll build up our own prescribers, build up our own DPPs, and we'll be able to hit more of those competencies within our setting. But that's a very, very useful document if you want to have a look at how your activities in your community pharmacy can be mapped towards prescribing, because that will be very important to the trainees coming through. Just looking at the bottom, that's fine. Very important, yes. So although the deadline is the 1st of March, at the moment we just need to commit or make a commitment that we will have a DPP in place and a prescribing environment in place, but we don't need to submit the details of that just yet. We just need to work towards it. So don't worry too much if you don't know the exact details of how you'll arrange that before the 1st of March. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So there have been new terms of participation developed and released by Oriel because of the recent changes. So as we have mentioned, the employers must ensure that their trainee pharmacist, that your site is an approved training site, that's always been the case. You've had to have it approved by the GPHC, and your training plan aligns with the new learning outcomes, and especially in the last few years, we've had to align to the new GPHC learning outcomes, but prescribing has always been omitted. Now that interim learning, those interim learning outcomes will change to full learning outcomes as the prescribing comes in. So you need to bear that in mind when developing your training plans. And again, in accordance with the GPHC requirements, we need to make sure we have that prescribing learning environment as part of the year. We have a designated supervisor, what used to be called tutors in the old days, in place, and a designated prescribing practitioner, what we used to call DMPs or other sorts of acronyms in the past. Next slide, please. This is quite a heavy slide. I'm not going to go through, I'm not read it all word by word, but I will go through the points individually. Just need to make sure, and most of these are fairly common sense. You're probably doing them already. We need to make sure that our sites and programs are aligned with the NHS England quality framework. So ensuring that we have good learning environments, good supervision in place, etc., and that we use the assessment strategy. So that is a strategy that's been laid out over the last few years, which enables us to assess our trainees in a consistent way, making sure they meet all the learning outcomes. And that just ensures a quality assurance of sign-off during the year. There is an e-portfolio, which has been, again, running for the last few years. This will allow trainees to upload their evidence online on the e-portfolio. You'll be able to assess it online. Some of you will already be using it, especially if you're part of the HEGP programs. But if not, it's actually quite a useful tool, but you will have to use it as part of the terms of participation. All trainees should have DBS checks. Should have always had DBS checks in reality. They've had them through university, and it's good practice, especially the setting that we and the sector that we work in. It's good practice. Commitment and training in terms of EDI, safeguarding for adults and children, information governance. All these modules can be found on e-learning for health. I hope I'm not using the wrong terminology for that, but everyone can access those training modules if you have an NHS email account, which all our community pharmacy staff can obtain. So you can access that training easily. It's standard across all NHS organisations. Your trainees will be required to complete a satisfaction survey, NETS, which again is done by other healthcare professionals already. So that'll be aligned with them. All supervisors must comply with the NHS England standard for supervisors. We've always had these for the GPHC. There's nothing out of the ordinary. It's what we would expect normally from our supervisors, but it'd be good to familiarise yourself with those standards. And finally, all trainees will be provided with dedicated time for development, interprofessional development and reflection. Again, that's always been stipulated in the GPHC learning contract anyway. So as long as you give your trainees some time for that, you will meet that standard. So these are the sort of things that we have broken down are the terms of participation. It's not as bad as an iTunes terms and conditions list, but it's important that we are aware of what we're signing up to, because we don't want to be caught out later on not practicing and performing alongside these standards when we have trainees, because that will cause problems, and there will be some quality assurance taking place and quality management taking place throughout the training year. Next slide, please. So final slide, and I can bring Jane back in for this as well. We would really like to know, we don't want to dictate to our colleagues in community how we should engage with them. We'd really like your thoughts on what are the best ways for NHS England to engage with you. what forms of communications work best for you, and what format would you like to receive information? If you can answer today, that'd be great. Give your thoughts. If not, feel free to feedback through us via your LPCs or other contacts. But this needs to be a two-way process. It's a huge step. It's the first time everyone's been recruited consistently. And we want to get community pharmacy on board as quickly and as smoothly as possible. And for that to happen, we need to have your input rather than dictate to you. Jane, do you agree?
Absolutely, and thank you, Khaled, for explaining about Oriel. And just to add to that, we absolutely support community pharmacy, continuing to train our pharmacists of the future. We have to remember that most pharmacists do actually work in the community pharmacy sector. And it's, I'm really pleased that now we're going to be quality managing the whole. I mean, that sounds like a bit of an official term, doesn't it? But it's really about supporting you to provide good, effective learning environments so that our trainees go on to provide much better patient care and outcomes in the future. And these are your pipeline of pharmacists who will be working for you going forward. So we are here to help you to engage with this process and answer any questions. So do put them in the Q&A and we will try and pick them up at the end. So, but do let us know. I am going to join a regular call with the LPCs. So if you've got any questions, either feed them in through there or you can feed them in through our own inbox, and we can pop that in the chat or the Q&As, or send it around after the event. So do we want to hand back to Lovejet? Is that...
Thank you so much, Khaled and Jane. That was a fantastic presentation. It certainly answered a lot of the questions I had, and I'm sure that we will be coming to you with more questions. We'll certainly make sure through the LPC route that we communicate any information that you want us to, and hopefully we'll be engaging much more in the future. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Noma and Rosie from Propharmace. Thank you so much for attending today. Thank you. I'll let you carry on. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lovejet. So just to start off our presentation, warning, we will be reinforcing some of the messages that were said earlier, and hopefully just to clarify and give you a few more tips about some key points. So I'm Noma Al-Ahmed, and I'm joined also by Rosie James, our pharmacy program director. And we've been having some of those conversations since the changes happened about how we should plan our training programs, what we should do about the changes. And we've been having them individually with community pharmacists. So it's really great that we're here today to talk to you about them as well, and share with you some key tips moving forward. So Rosie, would you like to start off?
Yeah, absolutely. Good evening, everyone. So I'm Rosie James, and I work with Noma at Propharmace, and I am the training program director. So we thought we'd just carry on from what Jane and Khaled have been talking to you about in terms of Oriel. We have lots of experience of supporting lots of our members through the Oriel process and taking trainees through the foundation training. Can we go on to the next slide, please, Noma? Sure. So just wanted to give you some top tips, I suppose, into how to make your program really attractive. Now, I don't expect you to be able to read what's on there. It's a bit like Khaled's screenshot. This is taken from Oriel. But just wanted to, I suppose, to show you what the trainees get to see. So as Khaled said, there's often over 3,000 programs in Oriel. They can use those filters in terms of, do they want community pharmacy? Do they want hospital? Do they want somewhere that's offering a multi-sector rotation? And what area of the country do they want? And then beyond that, this is what you have really in terms of selling your program to trainees. So there's 950 characters in that program description box that you have in order to highlight what you have on offer. And I know one of the frustrations that lots of you may have had with Oriel in the past is the fill rate, that you have programs, you've worked really hard to make them maybe multi-sector, you're offering a really good training program and then you don't get a trainee. And this can often be the thing that makes the difference is putting the detail in there and thinking about what's important for trainees. So can I have the next slide, please, Noma? So you've got that 950 character limit. So that's not word, it's characters. It's really, really short. And we get asked probably nearly on a daily basis around this time of year, like, can we write some community pharmacies good program descriptions? And we can help, but actually they will come out looking very much the same. So, you know, sell what you've got yourself. Jane mentioned that there will be a standard training provision from NHS England, and that will be basic. So think about what else you have on offer. So obviously Propharmace do training, and you may be part of a large organisation that has its own in-house training. You know, put in your description what is on offer for that trainee, whether it's a core programme, supplementary, that you're going to get them ready for service delivery. Lots of trainees are really interested in what their working pattern will be. You know, are you going to give them time off for training? The more information you can put in, the better from a trainee's perspective. One of the things you can't do is change your location. And we know from research that that is a real key driver for trainees. But actually, the research has also shown us that multi-sector training posts are really, really popular with trainees. And I think Noma will go into it. We know from 26-27 training year, it will be compulsory to have that 13-week multi-sector rotation. And then this year, the 25 year, you need to have a DPP. And if you haven't got independent prescribing in your community pharmacy environment, and though you're delivering prescribing services, you may well need to go outside of your own sector to get that. So our advice would be to future-proof and think about those relationships now, and then make that clear in the Oriel submission that you are maybe offering that multi-sector, and where the trainee will be expected to go. So listing the environments, travel links, public transport, you know, how a trainee is going to get from one site to another is important to them. Salary, also a driver. You know, we know that there's an increased contribution to training from NHS England in the 25-26 year. So you can consider salary and you know, on occasions accommodation if it's available. You know, if it's available, that you have accommodation that foundation trainees can be supported in. You know, get all of that into your program description. The next slide, please, Noma. And so in terms of Oriel support, as Jane and Khalid said, the HEIs do an awful lot with their students so that they know what the Oriel process looks like, and they have leads within the HEIs, and there is a system-wide approach to promoting places within all sectors and career events. So obviously you can attend those career events, your HEIs, to highlight the opportunities that you have for trainees. And as Propharmace, we work with multiple HEIs across England to prepare students for those assessments. But Noma's going to talk to you now as to how we as Propharmace help with that quality assurance of the foundation training year in terms of our supervisor training and increasing quality of supervisor training for both designated supervisors and DPPs.
Thank you, Rosie. So the key question here is why we need supervisor training. So we all know, Jane mentioned a key point earlier about the changes to pharmacy education. And one of those is that trainees are going to be working at a much higher autonomous level where they're working with more clinical skills. And to be able to support trainees through these training programs, it's highlighted the need that supervisors are also equipped to be able to supervise them through these programs effectively. And therefore, there is an expectation to quality manage training sites. And one of the key things that have been identified is that supervisors need to be able to develop these skills to do that well. We all know that this comes at a time when service pressures are really high. So any training that is offered needs to be really flexible. So Propharmace has been funded to offer national supervisor training. Now, in the past, when we had regional supervisor training, these were accessed by thousands of pharmacists and they were very successful. Feedback was great, but now these programs are national. They are available to any pharmacist who would like to develop their supervisor skills. So we're running two programs, one for educational supervisors, and this includes designated supervisors for foundation trainees, but it also includes, for example, pharmacy technicians who are supervising others as well. It's applicable to all, so anyone can sign up to that. But we're also running a designated prescribing practitioner program, and this is for those who are active prescribers who can be DPPs. So just to give you a summary of what's included in each program, with the educational supervisor program, it has 5 online modules. 2 of them are live workshops and 3 of them are via live online video learning. So we've tried to make these programs as accessible and flexible as possible. You can book workshops according to your schedule. The workshops are 3 hours long, so you can choose when that suits you, whether it's a morning, afternoon, or evening workshop, and book onto that. And then throughout the program, there are also a few assessments you need to complete, but nothing too extensive. With the designated prescribing program, it builds upon any learning you've done in the educational supervisor program, but it focuses more on assessing learners who are doing their prescribing qualifications. So for example, developing safe and effective prescribing. And because this role is quite new for pharmacists, being a designated prescribing practitioner, we are still trying to build capacity so that there are more DPPs in the community pharmacy sector. So to make those programs really accessible, just to let you know, they are completely funded by the NHS, so they're completely free and flexible. You can choose between video and audio learning. Each of the lessons within each of the modules is about 20 to 30 minutes long. And you get to download some really useful resources as well, which you can keep at hand when you're supervising your trainees. In terms of your decision as to which program you're going to do, if you are already a prescriber and have active prescribing skills, you can go directly to the DPP supervisor program. If you have never done any supervisor training before and would like to start off somewhere, then we'd recommend the educational supervisor program. And there's a lot of peer learning within the programs. When you attend the workshops, you meet other learners on the programs. We've had really great feedback from training sessions so far. And as I said, if you've never done any supervisor training before, we'd really recommend it, and you'll be pleasantly surprised, even if you are an experienced supervisor, what you might pick up on these programs. Because as you would agree, sometimes you might just have a trainee sent to you or sent to your pharmacy and told, there you go, you're going to supervise, without having had any training before. So this program is really going to equip you to deliver some of the key things and the changes that have happened in pharmacy education. Examples, for example, how to assess trainees through workplace-based assessments. There's a lot of video learning to support you with that, how to give feedback and how to facilitate learning, for example. There's lots of key tips to gain. Okay, so one of the key challenges that pharmacists have expressed since the new changes of the requirement to have a DPP as part of your placement offer is one of the common queries that we get at Propharmace. But with that, we've also got a couple of other FAQs that we're going to go through with you to try and answer some questions that might help you plan your training placements. So here are some of the most common ones. How do I structure my training here? Do I pay for multi-sector rotation or DPP? How long is needed for IP training? So that's the placement that you're going to send your trainees to. Where do I find a DPP? Should I offer multi-sector training now, given that this year it's not compulsory, but from next year it will be? How much should I pay, and how long should the dispensary placement be? So Rosie, where should we start? Okay, so the first points we've got on this slide is what we recommend is make a decision about whether you're going to be the DPP if you are a prescriber with active prescribing skills. If you want to be a DPP, then I would strongly recommend you join our DPP supervisor program and start to develop your skills to become a DPP. Because if you have that in-house this year, then that's absolutely great. You're already kind of in a good place to be able to offer the full foundation year. If you're going outside of your organization, then we would recommend you contact your ICS workforce transformation leads and try and see whether they can support you to find a DPP. Rosie, any further tips on this point?
Yeah, Jane and Khalid may well be able to direct you to the most appropriate contacts locally. So that might be the ICS transformation leads, it could be the community pharmacy leads, it could be your training hubs, or the foundation leads within the workforce training and education directorate. I know Stephen, as the lead for the Northwest, has been doing lots of work locally to think about how those access to a DPP in a prescribing training environment might be set up across the Northwest. So I think, contact with the system. Is that right, Jane?
Yeah, I've just put my video on just so you can see that I'm here. Yeah, so we have been having conversations with our training hubs in particular. We're quite lucky. We've only got 3 ICBs in the Northwest, so we've got really good relationships with them. They've all got education and training leads. They've all got community pharmacy clinical leads as well, and so we have been working closely with them to look at how we can access. So it's not all done yet, but we are working on it.
Okay,
thank you, Jane. And then I think the other thing I would say is, I'm looking at some of the names on the call. I know some people from my previous role. So I was with Health Education England as the lead for the trainee pharmacist and general practice programs. So some of you have already been doing and offering multi-sector places for a number of years. So you have those relationships with general practice. Use them. A lot of this will come down to local relationships and reciprocal agreements. The fact that general practice can now be the employer might work well in terms of actually the GP employing a trainee and a community pharmacy employing a trainee, and then swapping them halfway through. Sorry, Siri listening to me.
That's fine. And one of the things that the NHS have done to try and make it a little bit more flexible is removed the need to have 3 years prescribing experience. So they're going for more quality of prescribing experience rather than how many years. So as long as you have active prescribing experience, you can be a DPP. Number of trainees. So what you need to really make a decision now, if you haven't yet completed your Oriel forms, is how many trainees you're going to welcome into your organization. And in order to make that decision, if you think about whether you're going to send your trainee to a placement or not, whether you're going to offer the 12 months to yourself or you're going to send them to another organization to be able to meet that prescribing setting, how many months are you sending them for, and whether you want to have a trainee that swaps over between the 2 sites. So that's going to affect your decision. So for example, if you are planning to send a trainee to another site where that site also sends you a trainee, then that's very flexible, and it's actually it builds upon some of the pilot work that you were doing, Rosie, when you were with Health Education England, because that showed that there was a lot of benefit from having multi-sector training.
Yeah, so the employers found that it worked for both of them. I mean, it's been left flexible for you to build your own programs, whether that's block placements, multi split week models where the trainee goes to a different environment for a couple of days a week. You can choose what works for you, for your other partner, and for the trainee. And there's pros and cons to all of the different models. And the research into the GP split programs was that actually everybody thought that their model was the best because it worked for them and they designed it. So there's lots to be taken from that.
Okay, now with the higher fee being paid, which is the 26,500, if you are sending a trainee on a placement, then one of the things to think about is, are you going to pay a placement fee for sending your trainee to that placement, and what will it be? So we've had a lot of questions about that, and how much, how long should I send them for? How much should I pay the other organization? So there is no set fee that has been assigned to this. It's really up to you and your the organization that you're collaborating with to be able to agree a suitable rate. For example, one of those that I recommend is if you're sending your trainee to a placement for about 13 weeks, then the average payment for that should be, for supervision and for them to be able to resource that trainee, should be around 1,000 to 1,500. So that's, a recommendation that I usually give to managers. If it's longer than that, then it's up to you how you wish to plan it, but we feel that that is appropriate. However, if trainees are swapping over, then that's fair for both, so you probably wouldn't have to pay anything for that. One of the things, again, that this new process for taking on trainees and multi-sector training allows for is real flexibility with designing your program. So it's really important to make it work for you and your trainees. So we've had in the past, pharmacies who have maybe collaborated with a GP placement that's really far and not convenient for trainees. So the trainees are having to travel between 2 placements that are just, it didn't just work for them, and the trainees left. So just make sure whoever you're choosing to work with to become that prescribing placement is going to be suitable and fits in with your organization. So make it work for you. And any further tips from what you've learned on the GP and the multi-sector training programs, Rosie, that you can share here?
I think probably we've already shared that the main point in terms of advantages of doing it, and as the people on the call, I can
I think
the names that they've done it will be able to be advocates for what we did there. I think some of the unanswered questions are around things like, how much salary you should pay. It's like, think about what other people are offering and be competitive in that market in order to attract a trainee. And then the one that I think hasn't been answered, maybe Jane and Khalid might be able to help here, is the one around how long do they need to have the prescribing environment for. So if you're a general practice that hosts a trainee and they need somewhere to go with that prescribing environment, is there a length of time that's been stipulated, or is that as long as it takes to meet the learning outcomes pertaining to dispensing, which would be my guide?
That's pretty much it, really, as long as it takes. What we've been doing, we've run a series of workshops that have been quite sector specific to make sure that each different sector is sort of on board with what they need to do. So we've been looking at maybe doing it over 8 weeks. So to specifically focus on meeting those prescribing learning outcomes, but just bearing in mind that you don't necessarily need to be doing all of those in that 8-week placement. There's things, I know that there's a question in the chat about if you're a Pathfinder community pharmacy prescribing Pathfinder site, could you be the, do you need to have a partnership? Really good question. If you can, if you meet the criteria for being a DPP and you think you can meet those prescribing learning outcomes, that's absolutely fine. But even so, within community pharmacy, there will be certain clinical assessment skills that you will do in a community pharmacy setting. So you can be looking at those and, hand over to the DPP within another sector if necessary, and make sure that your trainee meets all of the learning outcomes. So, I think that's what we're working on, 8 weeks, I guess, as a minimum.
Yeah, thank you. And then finally, our advice is also to think long-term planning when you're thinking about future, foundation training and how things are changing. If you are not a prescriber yourself, there's still a lot of funded independent prescribing that you can access, developing prescribing services so that you make your training sites more attractive to foundation trainees, and of course, developing supervision skills across your organization and workforce, and then also system level working. So those partnerships and collaborations are not just, being arranged just for that trainee to benefit from. These are really going to benefit your pharmacy overall and moving forward as well. Now, the NHS training offer does include a training program, as Jane mentioned. However, we still don't know what the exact offer is. So we understand that it's going to be completely funded and you don't have to pay for that. However, if you want to make your program more attractive on Oriel, we always recommend that you say which training provider you're working with. And we do recommend that sites offer supplementary training. So examples of this might be, why you might need a training provider, even if there is NHS training, is things like support with training plans, developing, your supervisors, things like masterclasses and mock exams. Your trainee might require, have certain needs that they want support with. And there's also, thinking about the pharmacy services you offer and how you can access local training. So we are a provider of foundation training. We support trainees across the country. Currently, we run our program as 3 separate programs, which includes Head Start, Core, and Accelerate, and it includes a range of training and support for foundation trainees throughout the year. But of course, as the NHS releases their new training package, we will be adapting our offer so that it works well with whatever the NHS offers. And, there are a number of training providers out there, so you're free to choose who to work with. But, we are going to be here to support future pharmacists through with something that's applicable to what's needed when the new programs come out. So just a few more links here for what things that you can access after this webinar. So I think some of them were already mentioned, employer user guide, terms of participation. They're all on the NHSE website as well. Okay, any final comments from you, Rosie, before we hand back?
No, I mean, just a good luck with the process. And if people are struggling and have got questions, then, you know, keep talking to us, keep talking to your regional team with WT&E. You know, people are here to support you through it to make the foundation year in 2025-26 a great success.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roman and Rosie. That was a fantastic presentation, and thank you so much for sharing your top tips again. I think this will be so valuable to employers, and I'm sure we'll be reaching out to you, and we're working very closely with Jane and Khalid and Stephen as well from an LPC perspective as well as the other Northwest LPCs that are present today. At this stage, I'm going to hand over to Lou from CPGM to field any Q&A questions that are coming from the audience. Thank you, Lou.
Yeah, thanks, Lovejoy. Yeah, great presentations there. I hope everybody's got a really good understanding of Oriel now. There are a few questions that have not been answered yet in the Q&A. Some have been answered as I've been going through, but I've got a couple here for you. I think maybe one for Khalid or Jane here. We're struggling to find a DPP for students. Local practices don't have capacity. How can we resolve this?
Yeah, I saw that one, Louise, in the chat, and I was actually looking for our email address because we've obviously just moved to nhs.net emails, and I can't find it, but I will find it and pop it in the chat. If you are, as Khalid said earlier, if you are keen to engage with this, and you can provide everything else, and it's just getting that relationship with the prescribing environment and a DPP, put your place in and let us know that you are struggling. As I said earlier, we are working with the training hubs. We're trying to get them to engage with general practices, with PCNs. We're having lots of conversations with our ICB chief pharmacists as well about, because we know that some of their MedsMan teams are prescribers as well. So how we can utilise those teams as well as DPPs going forward. So get your post in and email us, and I will put our email address in the chat when I can find it, or at least we can share it afterwards anyway.
Thanks Jane. There's a couple more here that probably for you are Khalid. One I think Khalid partially answered, but maybe just to recap on that one, it's if a pharmacy has a pharmacist who could be a DPP but aren't currently prescribing on the NHS within the pharmacy, can they utilise the private prescribing? And I think it was a bit about private prescribing. I'm not sure that was covered.
So just
I think we have had conversations about this nationally, and I guess it depends what your private services are really. You know, if it was just a vaccination clinic, then I don't think you would probably be able to meet the range of the learning outcomes. But I guess it depends on what services you're prescribing for. And equally, yeah, so if it was aesthetics or something like that, you know, Botox and other things like that, that wouldn't really be an appropriate prescribing setting. But just depends. I mean, if anyone's got any queries, they can you know, email in and ask us. Have you got any thoughts, Khalid, about that? Sorry, we're both coughing, aren't we? In between.
We are. And no, that's exactly right. It really boils down to the range, the scope of prescribing, doesn't it, and the range of activities. I suppose ultimately all programs that are submitted will be checked and quality assured as well to make sure that what's being proposed is suitable. But that there has to be a range. It can't be very niche kind of commercial prescribing only.
Thank you. Thanks. There's one more here, but please do put more questions in the Q&A if you've got any. There is one more here though. What is the best way to become an independent prescriber and find a supervisor prescriber in Manchester? Maybe a little bit outside of the Oriel questions, but it's probably one worth asking.
That might be one for Anit, maybe, being in Manchester, possibly.
Exactly. How did you find your DPP, Anit, in the first place?
Going back a few years now on that, I think we obviously had a number of training programs that launched at that time. I think the challenge is a DPP, but I think one thing to say is we've had an increased number of pharmacists now that are independent prescribers as well working, and I think previously it was DMP, so we don't actually need them to be doctors. They can be pharmacists, and they are suitable for that role if they're working in an environment that supports prescribing, as Jane outlined, and that's what they are doing, I'd say, for the majority of their role. So it's not something that they did on the side of maybe being a community pharmacist that spent most of their time patient facing, but not prescribing, not actually delivering the prescribing services. So majority of their role. So that's also a suitable person for a DPP. I think that the other bit is obviously the time that you need to spend with them as well, and ensuring that you're able to spend that time shadowing and also being part of their processes and understanding, and also then having that time from yourself. So it's not as narrow as it used to be, where we were all struggling and challenged to try and get in with the local GP, or to try and find a DMP. So it is broader. But then we do have the other issue now with obviously the foundation trainees coming in as well on how we best appropriate that time for the DPPs, and we probably need some more pharmacist prescribers to step up on Aurelia. So I'll probably take a second just to make that call out, that if there are independent prescribers out there, and there's a question there about independent prescribers that are operating in the private sector and not necessarily NHS prescribing, I'd say, and I'm probably speaking for Jane and Khaled, we'd love to know about you and see how we can work with you as well. So where we could maybe support you to be able to grow and extend your role and help us as well with the gap that we've got with the number of DPPs that we need to support our trainees moving forward.
Yeah, thanks, Anita. And just to add to that, we know that some of the general practice pharmacists are being DPPs for community pharmacy colleagues. But I suppose if you're looking for a DPP, think about what's in it for them. You have a wealth of skills as a community pharmacist. You're building relationships you've got relationships with your general practices as well. We've now got Pharmacy First. The whole remit of that was to shift where patients go in terms of accessing services, release general practice time. So think about what's in it for them. And certainly those general practice pharmacists who are being DPPs at the moment are actually supervising in a particular clinical area. Often we're looking at asthma, hypertension, some of those services where we know that we've got big population health needs across the whole of the Northwest, and then getting them to do some of the some other sort of clinical tasks as part of their prescribing training within the practice, so to reduce some of the practice workload. And then the other way to sell it links into Anita's point as well, is that what we're trying to do is get everyone to think about expanding their scope of practice, developing more towards advanced level practice. We struggle when we talk about advanced practice to find community pharmacists to engage with the RPS's post-reg the core advanced curriculum. But lots of those pharmacists in general practice will be thinking they've done the primary care pathway, what's next for me? If they become a DPP, then they meet the education pillar of the RPS advanced framework, or advanced curriculum. So, that's an easy way for them to tick that box, really, is what I'm saying.
Rosie, I think you've got your hand up there. Did you want to add something?
Sorry, I was just typing an answer to a question as well. Yes, it was just, I know in other areas of the country, some of the ICBs have set up teach and treat type clinics. I don't know if there's anything like that happening in the Northwest that somebody could access if they're a community pharmacist and want to do their independent prescriber training, whether that offers access to DPPs and a way of doing it. It's just a question really for the panel.
We haven't set up teach and treat, I think, because that required quite a lot of money to set it up, didn't it? actually what we're looking for is probably to develop a more sustainable model. I know it's difficult at the moment, but to try and make this business as usual, that everyone, I'm not a prescriber, so I can't really say every one of us, but anyone who is a prescribing pharmacist should have that expectation that they would be a DPP of the future, really, and that we all are educators. So we are looking at sort of ways that we can do this, but I think, the reason that we haven't set up Teach and Treat is because it required a significant amount of funding, really.
Thank you. I've got another question here, again around independent prescribing. Does this call for more targeted support for community pharmacists to implement independent prescribing in their workplace? There's a comment that the NHS has done nothing to assist with this. We have got the IP Pathfinder, obviously, but many of us have done the IP but not been able to utilise it.
Yeah, and this is a huge problem, isn't it, really? It's what comes first. Do you get people prescriber ready? Do you get the services going first? So we're in this situation where we know we've got quite a lot of independent prescribers out there who aren't utilising their skills across all sectors. So we really need to work to get them prescribing. I think a good thing about Khalid and I now being within NHS England is that we can connect that service delivery part of NHS England with our workforce training and education section. So I will be picking that up, definitely, and we do have conversations with our regional chief pharmacist about how we can connect these things and make sure that they're aligned, so that we don't have a load of independent prescribers out there who aren't prescribing, because then I will have to find funding for return to prescribing courses and things like that. So that doesn't make sense or good use of NHS funding, does it? So yes, absolutely take your point, and we're doing everything we can to solve that, really.
Thank you, Jane. That is all the questions answered that have come through in the Q&A so far. So any last questions, please pop them in there. Have any of the presenters got any final comments they'd like to make?
I had a question.
If not, I can hand back to Love.
Thank you. I just had a question, Lou. Actually, I'm fielding the question to you before handing you hand back to me. I have had a couple of phone calls from people who want to do the IP course, but they are struggling to find a DPP. Now, obviously, I've advised them, if you're working in a particular practice or a PCN, you might want to talk to the people that you work with on a regular basis. So I've tried to support them in that way. But this issue does seem to be coming back, and I wouldn't want people that do want to do the IP not to do it because they're struggling to find a DPP to support that. So I don't know if you've got any advice on that. It's just that it's a question that's come to me many times.
So shall I say?
Yeah, all I was going to say, sorry, no, I'm jumping in there. I would say, loved it. You saying the right things about talk to people that you know, but coming back to that point about, what's in it for someone being a DPP, sort of making it, okay, you're going to train me, but going forward, I will be able to, you will be more confident that I will be consulting with your patients, whether that's in a prescribing role or even through pharmacy first, or just people walking in off the street consulting with a community pharmacist. So because the patients are all our patients, aren't they? They don't care whether they're seeing a GP or a practice nurse or a community pharmacist, that they're all the same cohort of people. So we need to make sure that everyone has got the right skills. So, just really saying what's in it for them. Noma, do you want to say?
I think also when you're applying to independent prescribing courses and the universities that you are applying to, if you're doing that now, they might have access to with past trainees and their DPPs, because depending on the scope of practice you're going for, just look around for different prescribing settings. So don't be too strict about I'm just going to look in GP practice. The other thing is that a lot of these organizations sometimes look at it from a financial point of view. So what's the return on investment for me if I train you up? Not everyone looks at it from, oh, I'm going to, develop professionally and enhance my skills by supervising someone else. So you've got to really try and, sell it to them in a way of, what benefit you might give that organization if you do your IP training there. So, just some tips that other IPs have done to get their DPPs, and also networks. The PCPA, for example, has a really good network via their Telegram groups. There are lots of independent prescribers in there. So, post a message in those groups, see if there's anyone in your local area that might be willing to support you. I think you just have to, try and ask.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Noma. Lud, is there any more questions?
We have got somebody, one of the participants has put their hand up, but I'm not quite sure how to allow them to speak. Linda, I don't know if you want to type anything to the chat for us. Oh, allow to talk. There we go. I've pressed that now. If you unmute, you can join us and ask us a question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, yes.
Oh, lovely. I'd like to say thank you very much for the information that you've done this evening. It's been really useful. So you're going to give us some details as to possible DPPs. Do you have any idea at the moment of the numbers that you might have if pharmacies do struggle to identify DPPs in the Northwest?
Sorry, Lynn.
Sure. Do you want to go first, Khaled, and then I'll chip in as well?
I was just going to say, when you say that we've said that we're going to kind of give details of how many DPPs we have, I'm not sure that's exactly what we committed to. Although we will try our best. I think there's an exercise taking place where we're trying to find out what DPPs we have and who's willing to partner up with one organisation with another organisation, and we can do some matchmaking there. I think that's the extent of what we'll be doing. But at the moment, we don't have a comprehensive list of DPPs. I don't think we'll ever have that.
No. Okay. I wasn't expecting you to partner everybody up. It was really just to see if you had places that we can go to. We've already started speaking to some hospitals, but I imagine everyone's had the same ideas. So I just thank you for your help and assistance. Lovely. Thank you.
We do know that. I mean, we don't know how many DPPs there are because it's not a, it's not an annotation on anyone's register. So we've no idea. However, we do know that we trained up a lot of pharmacists working in general practice under the clinical pharmacist and general practice scheme, or the under the R's roles as well. So, they're people to tap into, I guess.
Lovely. And have you started speaking to the mental health trusts as well in your area?
Yes, we have. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Linda. I have no more questions. I don't think we have any more hands up.
I think Noma's got a hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Just one more point I wanted to make about. Yeah, sorry, just one more point about DPPs. One of the things we found out when we launched our DPP training programs is a lot of pharmacist prescribers don't know what a DPP is. So when you approach someone to become your DPP, I would add onto that a quick explanation of what you expect them to do for you. And one thing that DPPs sometimes misunderstand is that 90 hours that they have to supervise you for does not all have to be done by the DPP themselves. The DPP is responsible for, facilitating your placement, making sure that you do a certain amount of time with them. So, for example, some universities ask for about 25 hours, some slightly more, some, it really depends on the university. So, for example, within their organizations, you might shadow someone else in the multidisciplinary team. So just try and make it, break it down for them so they understand what they're expected to do. And usually that also helps to communicate that and make them say yes.
Thanks, Noma. That's great. Khaled?
Yeah, in terms of searching for DPPs, it sounds like we're on a treasure hunt, doesn't it? But broaden your thinking in terms of where they are currently placed. We've kind of narrowed are thinking to general practice and hospitals, but Linda mentioned mental health trusts, substance misuse services are another place pharmacists work, and they prescribe, and there's other prescribing practitioners there as well. So there's other options that you could explore, and some of them are actually very open. They're quite happy to have people coming in to do some supervision. So have a think beyond just general practice and hospitals.
Thanks so much, Khalid. Rosie?
Yeah, just really quickly, I think I'm thinking out loud, obviously as Propharmace, we have the national contract for DPP training. And one of the things we're considering and talking to our colleagues about is how we maybe create a network for DPP. So people who've gone through the training to go, actually, how do they talk to each other and continue to support each other? And then maybe how can people use that network to go, I want a DPP, who's where? To link people up. So that's in our thought process. It's not come to fruition yet as to exactly how we do that, but it supports this conversation, doesn't it?
And I think that's a really good suggestion, actually, because I think there's, we know that you can train people, even training people in prescribing, but actually taking that first trainee pharmacist on or writing that first prescription can seem such a hurdle. So building those networks of peer support and people who can provide more senior support is really, really important, I think, to encouraging people to do it and take it on and feel that they're not on their own doing that.
Thanks so much. Lou, I'm conscious of the time, so I think we will have to wrap up very quickly now, but I'll hand over to you for any final questions.
Yeah, there are a couple of final questions. One is, can a prescribing nurse act as a DPP? Can anybody answer that? Thank you, Rosie. I've got a nod of the head there. And Linda's just asked one more question. With regard to writing the training plan for 25-26, will an outline of the basic free training be available? Jane, is that one you can answer?
Yeah, so we are just in the process of commissioning that specification at the moment. So is that in terms of the training plan? Let me just have a look back at that question. So I don't know. I'm not quite sure. Khalid, do you know what the requirement is in terms of what the Oriel ask is, that you can help us answer that?
Actually, yeah, with Oriel. So with Oriel, there is a part where you would input your training. If you had a supplementary training program, you could put it in there. The current guidance is just do what you would normally be doing, and if something changes, we can amend it. We can hide that later. I think Linda's question is in terms of the training plan, because when you put your training plan together, you would include any training programs you're using and how they would map to your learning outcomes. So the answer to your question is we don't know at the moment what that looks like, Linda. So there's no rush to do your training plan at the moment. You've got plenty of time. It doesn't have to be done by 1st of March. So in terms of your training plan, you can hold off for that until next year.
Thanks, Khalid.
Yeah, I think that's everything. That's all questions answered. Definitely can't see more hands up now. Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Any final comments from you?
I'm just going to say I've put our workforce training and education generic inbox in the chat. So, if you want linking up with Khalid or any of the foundation trainee pharmacist team, then we can connect you up there. Each of our training program directors and regional facilitators have an area that they cover, and if you've got any questions after this, then do get in touch and we can try and answer those. But go out, talk to your network of other healthcare professionals, and think about how you can partner up, and just to encourage you to put your posts on Oriel by the 1st of March, because really exciting times for pharmacy. I know it's challenging, but I think we will create a much better workforce going forward for the future.
Thanks so much, Jane. Thank you, Khalid. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Rosie and Noma. It's been a fantastic presentation. Thanks to Anit and Lou as well for their support too. And we will send a recording of the webinar out, and we will make sure that we collate the slides and send them out to any of the attendees. And we'll also make it available wider as well to anybody who couldn't attend this. Thank you very much and have a great evening, everyone. Bye.
So very quickly, don't cut us off. I think the email address has gone privately to the hosts and panelists. It needs to be put into the public.
Oh, sorry.
And we can't. I don't think we can put it into the public chat.
I can do that. I'll do that now quickly, and I'll keep the meeting open for a minute or so to give people a chance to jot it down. I'm just going to just do it to everyone. I think that should be to everyone now, so it is there. Hopefully you can all see that.
And also let us know about any ideas for keeping connected with Community Pharmacy. That would be really helpful. Khaled and I would love to hear that. Thank you.
We'll be in touch. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.